What if everything you perceive, this screen, your hands, even time itself, isn't fundamentally real, but a projection of consciousness? That's the radical proposition philosopher Rupert Spira explores in this lecture. And today, we're going to test his claims against modern science, direct experience, and ancient wisdom traditions. I'm Sapphire, and this isn't just theoretical. We'll examine how quantum physics observer effect mirrors Spira's ideas, a simple 10-second experiment to test if objects truly exist out there, why Buddhist monks and neuroscientists are arriving at similar conclusions. Let's listen. Here is Rupert.
From consciousness's point of view, experience isn't divided into a subject and an object. Mm-hmm. It is consciousness itself that is taking the shape of mind. By mind in this context, I mean mind in the broadest sense of the term, to include all thought and perception. It's not, I don't just mean thinking in this case. When I use the mind in this context, I mean the totality of objective experience, thought and perception. It is consciousness itself that is taking the shape of thought and perception. And in fact, in order to bring manifestation into existence, consciousness has to limit itself. Because prior to manifestation, that is prior to the knowledge of an object, consciousness only knows its own unlimited being. That is its primary experience. So how could unlimited consciousness know a limited object? How could infinite consciousness know a finite object? There is no room in infinity for something finite. If something finite was to appear in the infinite, then that little finite something would displace a little bit of the infinite, and the infinite would then no longer be infinite.
Yes.
So infinite consciousness cannot know a finite object. So how then is consciousness going to bring manifestation into existence? Because manifestation means form. And form, by definition, means limitation. So in order to bring manifestation into existence, consciousness has to know something finite. But infinite consciousness cannot know something finite. Mm-hmm. Therefore, to bring manifestation into existence, consciousness has to overlook the knowing of its own infinite being. It has to forget itself. That is what Rumi meant when he said knowledge of the world is a kind of ignorance. It's what Wordsworth meant when he said our birth, or the birth of the waking state, is but a sleep and a forgetting. In other words, infinite consciousness appears in the form of finite subjects and objects in order to bring the manifestation which is inside itself in potential, out of itself into existence. And that's what existence means, ex and sistere, to stand out from. So in order to make a world stand out from itself, or seem to stand out from itself, because in fact no thing ever actually comes into existence, but in order to seem to bring manifestation into apparent existence, consciousness must fall asleep to the knowing of its own being. It must veil itself from itself, and only as such can it appear as the world.
I totally got it. Ultimately, that's, I guess what I'm describing is the structure of that. You know, in the waking state, there's this ignorance happens where consciousness limits itself.
Yes.
And appears as, you know, that's over there. And
yes.
But I guess what I'm describing is the structure.
The structure of that limitation.
Of that, yeah.
The structure of that limitation is in fact, the laws of physics are not in fact the laws of physics. They are the laws of mind. We only think they are the laws of physics because in our culture we still believe in material stuff called matter. In fact, there is no material stuff called matter. It's all mind. But that doesn't mean that the laws of physics are nonsense. It's just that they pertain to the patterns and habits that govern the unfolding of mind rather than the behavior of matter. So this unfolding of mind proceeds in an orderly fashion through a series of laws through which consciousness is progressively narrowed until it appears as the material world.
I see that. I see that. I guess I was just asking if these observations I've been making during the meditations, looking closely at the way the world appears and noticing how, in a sense, what we're looking at now is it's like our biography in motion.
Yes.
We think this has happened. That what we're seeing is what is, but it's a limitation, which is
it's what's happening. It's not what is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is all past, in a sense. The limitation is the imposition of memory, the constant imposition of memory.
In order to conceptualize it as a limited object, what we are conceptualizing has already passed by the time we've conceptualized it. But in order to experience it, we're not experiencing the past. It's not possible to experience what's past. Mm-hmm. So the actual experience itself is always an experience in the now, and it's always actually an experience of consciousness alone. We have to engage in an act of conception or thought in order to abstract a multiplicity and diversity of objects and selves from the moment itself.
So there's
which is infinite consciousness.
There's the experience which happens in no time.
The experience itself always happens out of time, out of space, and is only infinite consciousness.
But then like a millisecond later, Rupert is there. Then I
Yeah.
have a chair over there.
Yes, but actually the appearance of Rupert the object over there creates the very time in which it seems to appear.
Okay.
So it's not that there's a millisecond later the separate object Rupert appears. It's that the time and the apparent object co-arise together.
Oh boy.
Because prior to the conception of the object over there is no time or space present in which the object or event can arise. So they're co-created.
That's fun to contemplate.
It is fun to contemplate because it takes thought right to the edge.
You can't go there.
It just before it goes over the edge. And that is actually the value of pondering this kind of thing. For some people, we're just having an abstract philosophical conversation. But to others, we are taking thought right to the brink. And then there is a moment when it falls.
Mm. Yeah. And when you try to go over the brink is when you start to get frustrated, and when mind tries to...
Yeah, because mind cannot go over the brink.
It wants to get involved all the time.
Yeah, the mind wants to survive its own death so that it can report on it. Which keeps it on the brink as opposed to in the ravine. Yes.
Stressed? Pause and ask, can I actually locate where I end and the problem begins? That apparent gap is where the illusion forms. 2. Scientific validation. Recent studies on a 2023 quantum cognition study show our perception literally changes molecular behavior, echoing Spira's physics as mind claim. 3rd, contradictions to consider. Spira says objects don't exist independently. But does this account for shared reality? Why do we all see the same traffic lights? I'd love your thoughts below.